To Akihiko Tanaka-san, President of JICA, Ambassador Milan Vivir, who hosted me last April in Georgetown University for the Hillary Clinton Awards. My warm regards, ma'am. Other distinguished guests, panelists, staff, and officers of JICA. Good day to everyone. Our negotiations with the MILF was primarily intended to restructure the relationship between the Filipino majority and the Bangsamoro people in the South. But it was also duly accompanied by the goal of restructuring the relationship between men and women in the prospective Bangsamoro political entity and the whole country. From the beginning, we in the government panel were conscious that achieving parity of esteem or mutual respect and equal rights between the majority and the minority populations of the country had to be accompanied by the goal of achieving the same parity of esteem between men and women in terms of the process as well as the outcomes. That's why the peace negotiations between the government and the MILF provides an interesting story of how women increasingly became important participants at different levels. First, at the state level of the formal process, or what we call Track 1 peace building, which takes place at the highest level of the states. But the Mindanao peace process is also a developing story on how active political participation is cascading down to the grassroots. It can be said that as the talks progressed, so did the awareness on the part of everyone, the government, the MILF, international and domestic actors, of the need to consciously bring in more women to meaningfully participate in peace building. One effective approach was to create more spaces, to put more seats inside the negotiating room. This enabled more women, especially on the MILF side, to join the formal talks. Through consultants, observers, and technical working groups, we saw the number of women blossom inside the negotiating room. We have now brought in more women to join the various mechanisms for implementation of the different aspects of the comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro, especially the last item on the Annex on Normalization. This process of bringing in more women has been slow, but it has become irreversible. 3 out of 6 government signatories to the comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro are women, with myself as the chair. The MILF panel was all men. In all, just 3 of the 12 signatories were women. Still, it was a big leap. Nearly all past negotiations were exclusively done by men. One ambassador to the ASEAN asked me this question at a forum organized by the ASEAN Institute for Peace and Reconciliation last April. What is the hardest thing about being a woman in the negotiations? What, on the other hand, is the best thing about being a woman in the talks? Let me start with the advantage of being a female negotiator, and that is how other women, community women, women of the MILF, teachers, and other women leaders easily approach me, tell their stories, or explain the context to me in forums, consultations, and field visits. Their stories and insights have provided me with a much clearer picture of the situation and how we can overcome problems. Without their input, how can we complete the picture? How can we get to that agreement that we achieve with very clear provisions that will promote women's civil, political, economic, and social rights? As for the hardest thing about being a woman negotiator and peace builder, this is none other than the biases and prejudices against women that persist. As a woman in public life, one gets tested 2 ways. First, against men. Second, against other women. You not only have to prove that you can be as good as other men, you also have to measure up to the standards of the best women who came before you, the pioneers, the mothers of pearl in the long struggle for women's rights. In other words, the ceiling gets higher each time and you cannot fall short. Worse, a woman in public office would have to contend with sexism, which can manifest itself in a most hostile and threatening way, especially in the unregulated world of social media. Despite all the societal barriers, women themselves must believe in the art of the possible. the successful outcomes that we see now did not happen overnight. The relatively impressive involvement of Filipino women in peace building evolved from the 17-year negotiation process itself and the context of the whole democratization of the Philippine state and society. Some of the recent trends that supported women's participation in the quest to find peaceful and just solutions to the armed conflicts in the country are as follows. Number 1, the civilianization of the peace track. From the dominance of military men and religious institutions in the negotiations, we saw Track 1 opened up to civilian institutions like the academe and civil society that are not extremely male-dominated. Second, the conceptual shift from traditional security to a broader view of peace and security or human security, including the focus on not just on the combatants, but the whole communities, and the tighter interface of socioeconomic interventions with the security and political components. Ceasefire with development and capacity building were important features of the whole negotiations as well as in the implementation. Security in the social sphere cannot but involve the women. They simply could not be ignored anymore. A third contextual factor is the enhanced access to education of the general populace, where young girls and studious women have shown they can excel. Through scholarship and training programs opened up in the course of the peace process, we have produced more women professionals and experts. Still, in all, we need more long-term training and fielding of women in peace and security and related fields such as foreign affairs, land and natural resource use and management, mediation and conflict resolution, because the work is never done. That is why women should not let pass every opportunity where we can stand up and be counted, lead and make decisions. We have been waiting for these opportunities for centuries. We need to seize the moment and secure the future for one and all. Most of all, we have to continue to inspire each other. Let me share this anecdote. It happened at a side event on women during the seminar organized by JICA last June 2014 in Hiroshima, called the Consolidation for Peace for Mindanao. I told the largely female audience about the pretest of women's attitudes in several parts of Mindanao, conducted by a women's network called the Women Engaged in Action on UN Resolution 1325, or WEACT. The pretest showed that before going through the training, most women believed that it was not possible to control the proliferation of firearms and to disband the private armed groups of politicians. They agreed that many violent incidents that women experience as individuals or groups involved the use of guns, but they did not see how the proliferation of weapons can be stopped. Many among them believe that they should not participate in peace, security, human rights, and governance work. But after going through the training and discussion on the peace agreements and the various activities being done, they express optimism that things can still change for the better, especially if they help. They also identified possible roles for themselves. After I told this story in Hiroshima, a Japanese woman in the audience stood up and said, "I am like those women. I believed I can do nothing. Now I know that we can change our lives." Indeed, empowered women inspire other women. This is one of the best things about being a woman involved in peace building, how we are able to motivate other women to trust in their own worth, in their own power to change things for the better, and in the power of their own ideas. The women in the training conducted by WEACT, for instance, came up with many ideas. They said they can encourage the men in their lives to fully support the decommissioning of weapons and combatants. They can ask them to accept stricter regulation on use of firearms. They can serve as monitors in the enforcement of regulation and the commitments under the Annex to Normalization signed by the government and the MILF. The women also said that they can take part in the future police force for the Bangsamoro. They express their desire to enhance their capabilities as mediators in community conflicts and to develop knowledge and skills in early warning and early response in order to prevent conflict. Some of them are thinking about the benefit of a women's political party that can run in elections and have a seat in the future Bangsamoro Assembly. All of these were just ideas, but now they are in the works. They are being realized because a lot more women are carrying the torch. Because I can tell you that not many men will do it for the women. Women will have to help themselves, even as we welcome everyone's support. Good day to everyone.